Hey, Mike here. Today we're gonna create a wallet app. Basically, it's a stack of cards, credit cards, and by clicking on a card, we're gonna expand the transaction details. So as usual, we're starting with an iPhone screen and creating a rectangle for the black background. Now let's add a screen title. So I'm writing wallet and changing the font size to 32 and changing the weight to black. And I'm gonna use San Francisco font here. And also I'm placing it 32 points from the left edge of the screen. Now I'm creating a rectangle, the height of the bounding box of the text, and creating a circle inside that rectangle. Now I change the color of the circle to white, and then I decrease the height of the rectangle to be the height of the actual text, not the bounding box. And we should end up with something like this. That circle should also be about 32 points from the right side of the screen. Inside the circle I create a short black line, set the stroke width to about 3 points, and then the ending and joints to the middle option, which basically is rounding them. Now I duplicate the line, set the rotation to 90 degrees, and then I align both lines to form a nice plus. Okay, time for our first card. So I'm making a rectangle and I'm making sure that it's 32 points from either side. Let's not use that boring blue again. So I'm creating a diagonal gradient from two different shades of pink. Now let's duplicate the card, and we'll change the color just by moving the hue value a little bit more to the left, so it's gonna be a more purple shade. Make sure the second card is actually under the first one on the layer list, and then shrink it by 20 points and move it under the first card. Leave just a tiny bit sticking out, maybe 20 or 30 points. Duplicate the second card again, move it under the second card on the layer list, and then let's change the hue by moving the slider a little bit more to the left, so it's gonna be a little bit more blue. And make sure that the gradient actually has the darker part on the bottom. Okay, time for some depth. So let's add a shadow to the first card, and let's pick a color from the card itself, so it's gonna be a pink shadow. And let's pick the Y value at 8 and the blur at 32. Decrease the opacity of the shadow to about 30%, and then let's make it a little bit darker. Now let's do the exact same thing with the second card, but pick the color from that card. And to make it stand out a little bit more, I'm gonna make the card gradient a little bit lighter. Luckily the MasterCard logo is pretty easy to make, so I'm just making two circles overlapping a little bit and decreasing their opacity. Now I'm adding a name and a card number. Make sure that the card number is in a much thinner font, and also make sure it has enough letter spacing so each individual number is pretty easy to read. And in case you're wondering, it's a completely random card number, so it's not really my card. Okay, so quickly playing with some alignments and then adding a bank logo at the very top. So I'm just using a random bank name here with a larger font so it's kind of more visible. Now I create the latest transactions and I simply create a larger title and then the individual transactions under it. And each transaction is basically a name of the supplier, a date and a price. And create whatever you want here. Complete the process until you have at least 4 transactions so the screen is not gonna look empty. Duplicate the first card and pick the one that's lower on the layer list. Rename it to Card 1 Backup. For now I'm gonna disable both the fill and the shadows and set a border, a wide border of about 2 or 3 points. Okay, let's even bring the Card 1 Backup much higher on the layer list so it's visible as a white outline for the main card. Now let's duplicate the entire screen to create the second stage for our animation. On the first screen, decrease the Card 1 Backup opacity down to 0. Grab the pink card in the background and stretch it until it fills the entire screen. Make sure your wallet title and your plus are on a higher layer than the card on both of the artboards. Select all the transactions on both artboards and create a group on each one. On the second screen, bring the transactions closer to the card and put them a little bit lower on the first screen. And on the first screen, decrease the opacity of all the transactions down to 0 so they're not visible on that black background. Duplicate the wallet text, change the text to done and move it higher. I'm also making the font size smaller here at about 24 points. and then simply copy that text onto the first artboard as well. Now on the first screen, decrease the opacity of done to 0, and on the second screen, decrease the opacity of wallet to 0 and move done in its place. Okay, let's test it out. So click on the card and add an interaction that points to the second screen, set it to motion, and for now set it at 3 seconds. Now connect the done button to the first screen. Time to test the animation. For now it's a little bit slow, but that's actually good, because it allows us to test it and see how everything moves. I don't really like how the screen titles overlap during the animation, so to avoid that I'm moving the wallet part to the bottom. Okay, it looks way better now, but we can still make it even better, so let's do this. Okay, time to modify how the transactions slide onto the screen. So click on the first card and edit timeline, and modify it to make the animation shorter and to kind of overlap it with the actual card movement. As we found out before, to make an animation look really good and natural, I'm also changing the pace and the starting points of all the other elements, so they don't all start at the same time. The outline was a way to still have the card shape in place, but I actually realized that it's gonna look way better if we bring back the gradient fill and the shadow. Make sure to bring back the gradient and the shadow and remove the border also on the first screen, but it's not gonna be visible since the opacity is 0, but that's okay. You can now speed up the entire animation to about 1 or 1.5 seconds and you can test it out. It looks quite cool, so now you can play around with it, add some additional functions or change some additional animations. You can also use the card as a mask and then put the transactions inside it. It's gonna make it look even more natural when they appear. Okay, so have fun, play around, and if you come up with a very nice animation based on this tutorial, send it to me and I'm gonna post it in some future videos along with my analysis. Okay, thanks for watching, I hope you liked this video. Please remember to subscribe and see you next time.